So here we are. Welcome to our webinar today. We're going to be discussing a question about what to do when your CMS is at end of life, where to go next. We'll move on and do a quick introduction. Hello, everyone who's attending there and saying hi in the chat.
Hi there.
So just quickly about Moriyama, I think mostly everybody who's dialed in today has some idea about us. We're an Umbraco Gold partner, so we are an Umbraco experts. We're also DevOps experts in Azure DevOps, so we spend plenty of time doing deployments using Azure DevOps and have skills there to deploy securely and reliably. And we are data migration experts with some technology that we've built around, well, I've put JSON up there, but it's a little bit more than that, isn't it? Yeah, but I needed a logo. That allows clients to move data into Umbraco easily and without as much pain as you would get if you were doing that manually. The other thing about Moriyama is that we are also part of the Cohaesus Group. Okay, so Cohaesus owns Moriyama and a number of other specialist agencies, and across the group, each agency brings their own specialization, with Cohaesus bringing the UX, UI, and strategy. Moriyama brings Umbraco, Drupstar brings Drupal skills, Molzana do data analytics, CRO, SEO, and across the group we have some offshore agencies, Angtech in India, Head Channel with some developer resources in Poland. So we are one of a collection. We are one of a number of specialist agencies within the Cohaesus Group. So if there's something that Moriyama doesn't do, chances are within the group we can do that. So let's go on and quickly just maybe introduce ourselves as individuals. So my name's Warren. I'm the MD at Moriyama. So mostly our clients get to speak to me on a regular basis or semi-regular basis. And then we have...
Is it me next? Yeah, I'm Paul. I'm a lead Umbraco developer and I'm leading the support side of the business at the moment.
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, and I'm Matt. I'm a technical director and looking after all of the bigger picture of our development work, with obviously a specialism in Umbraco as well.
Lovely. And they didn't mention it, but Paul's a 5-time Umbraco MVP.
Yeah, just recently got it renewed again, 5th time. Yeah.
And Matt's been appointed to the Umbraco Community Council board.
Team, yeah, community team. It's looking at that sort of bigger picture view of Umbraco, where it's heading. So it's taking input from the community.
So both Matt and Paul are well hooked into what is the latest and greatest in Umbraco space. Okay, so I'd like to move on now and have a look at the first question, if you'd like, that I'd like to answer today. And if we talk about Umbraco upgrades and migrations, we sometimes, we make a distinction between upgrade and migration. And my question is, why do we do that? What's the difference? And what is this thing that we call a migration/upgrade?
Shall I answer that one first?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, so and the way I would see an upgrade is when there is a sort of a nice linear path where you can easily go through some, not necessarily easily, but you can go through some upgrade steps. I'm thinking between the same versions of the same major. So like on V7, you would do an upgrade to the latest, like 7.15 point something. So you go from one version of V7 to another, and that would be what I would class as an upgrade. And then when V8 came out, we had there was a change to the code base and everything, and it wasn't as straightforward to just do an upgrade and now it works. The database schema changed and things like that. So not only do you have to upgrade the actual code base, but you also have to change a lot of things. So then it becomes more of a migration when there's lots of changes to take into account. And same when you get to V9 and 10, they're now no longer .NET Framework, they're now .NET Core. So there's another change there. So from V9 to 10 would be seen as an upgrade, but I would say from 8 to 9 is more of a migration. Because again, it's a change in the architecture and all sorts. So it's not straightforward, but some things have been made easier the higher the version. But definitely 7 to 10 is definitely a migration. 7 to 8 is most likely a migration.
Matt, did you want to add anything? And I think my next slide is, or our next slide is the diagram. Is that?
Yeah, I think the layers that we see in this diagram fit in very much what we've just been talking about. So we have on the left-hand side the code layers. Each version of Umbraco is built on .NET, but there's been some major changes in the .NET. So the .NET framework that everything up to Umbraco 8 was based on is very different to .NET Core and .NET 5 and 6, which now the versions from Umbraco 9 onwards are based on. So that's a major change at the very bottom of that stack. And then Paul was talking about sort of the Umbraco version. If you've got a major Umbraco version change, then usually there's quite a lot of work involved. But if it's just a small and a minor upgrade from a minor version within the same major version, then that would be quite straightforward. And then on top of that, you get sort of all these other things like sort of third-party packages that have been written by the community. Umbraco is fantastic for having third-party community packages which allow you to edit certain types of data. But of course, as soon as there's a major Umbraco version change or even a .NET version major change, then a whole set of new packages are needed. So when you're taking data from one site to another, any number of these layers could change, and the more of the layers that change, the more complex it is. So yeah, some of them, some simple updates might just be one of those layers that changes. More complex upgrades, like if you're going from sort of 8 to 10, probably every single one of those layers would change. So it's really sort of which of those layers have alterations or require alterations that affect the scale of the upgrade process.
So I think that then that's for me, that's a clarifying thought. Like it's the changes across the layers that govern the complexity of your move, whether you can just do an upgrade or you're forced to maybe do a migration, which is a longer path where you have to rebuild something or move something because you can't simply upgrade one of the layers. So there will be Umbraco sites potentially that are quite simple and straightforward, and you could perhaps upgrade the layers. And then you've got other Umbraco sites which are going to be more complex. They've got various third-party packages in them, a lot of custom code, and perhaps on a very old version of .NET that has to change, and then that adds complexity to the upgrade, and we could end up in a migration situation. So I think with that in mind, we've seen, if I was to count them, I think we've seen at least 4 variations on the thing. You could do a classic upgrade, which is your layers are all quite simple, and you go, okay, that one goes to that one, and okay, we can manage that. We'll call that a classic upgrade. But I don't think we've seen a classic upgrade approach from well, we've done the approach, but I wouldn't call it simple for classic upgrade. We know we've seen build brand new, and we've seen various people do that. The takeaway that I have noticed for the build brand new is, okay, you build a brand new site, But because you're building a brand new site, you've got your content in the old site and you don't have your content in the new site. So how do you get the content across? And often clients think, well, yep, content, we can manage the content, away we go. But it's such an enormous task when there is so much content and so many people responsible for owning different content, and they have to be all managed to deliver on time, and it becomes a big project, in fact, to build the content. Then we've got this this third one here, which is build brand new. I forgot to put new in there. And automagically, I think I was more focused on wanted to use the word automagic because it's a great word. Automagically migrate the content. So, Matt, what do I mean by automagically migrate the content?
No idea. It's a terrible word. Yeah, no, I think what you mean there is you want to we want to sort of say we got this content in this format, in this layout in the old site, we got this content in this different format and different layout in the new site, but there is a way we can sort of map the two together, and so we want to be able to transfer the data from one to the other using some sort of mapping in the middle that allows us to say this is how we're going to just move all the content across, and what it means is that sort of you just move all your content. There's a way of doing it. It reduces that hundreds of hours or whatever it is of content entry and potential mistakes, and it gives that starting point. Not just you've got a brand new site, but you've got a brand new site full of content.
Right. And so that's an option that we have with our data tools and our migration. So that's a good one to keep in mind. And then the fourth one is you could go grand, and you can, even if you want to, run 7 and something else, or 7 and 8 or 7 and 9 at the same time, serving different content from one and the other. This is quite an elaborate approach, but it would allow you to keep something of the old while you're introducing something of the new. Paul, you have some experience here.
Yeah, so the second part of last year, I was working on a site which needed to do exactly that. They had a well-established, very large website, and they were afraid of doing a big bang upgrade approach to go to. They wanted to go on a long-term solution, so we didn't go to V9, we went to V8 actually. So they went from 7 to 8, and they wanted to keep the old site running, but have a phased approach enable them to just roll out certain sections of the site to be built on the V8 version. And so what it allowed us to do was to work iteratively to build up this new site, how they need it to be, with the document type, structure and everything completely different to what it was in the V7 site. And we started off with the blog section. So the whole of the site was being served on the V7 site, but we used Cloudflare to route the traffic for the blog and anything below that to the V8 site. And that was allowing them to test it and see how it goes and have more confidence within this new V8 build, and then decide, right, what's the next section we should build. And it helped with shaping the document types and everything like that. And it was really good phased approach, because they got to give feedback on all of these things and edit and use these before the whole site had fully gone live. So it meant that when we came to the next section, we'd already got feedback on what they thought about that on the previous phase. So we could build that into the next phase when we build all the document types for the other parts, and it worked really well. And yeah, eventually we migrated everything over, and then we were able to just switch it over to the V8 site completely. And the client was really happy with that.
Good, nice. That's a good story. So those are the 4 moving forward, but let's be frank, let's be honest. There's actually a 5th option, really, which is do nothing.
Yeah.
Just leave it running and see what happens. What are our thoughts on do nothing?
Well, my first thought would be security. If you do nothing, then if you was on an old version of a CMS, it's not just Umbraco, it could be any of the CMSs out there. They all require security patching here and there. And Umbraco, after I think is it the August next year, they won't be supporting Umbraco 7 with any security patches anymore. So it's going to be completely end of life. So if you're still on an Umbraco site, then really you should be off that Umbraco 7 site by then, and you should be because you want to make sure your site's secure. It's not vulnerable to attacks that keep being released details of and things like that. So yeah, if you do nothing, then you not only are you falling behind in terms of security and things, but also there's better editor experiences that could be had if you were to upgrade, and which could make you more efficient when it comes to editing your content or the workflows involved with those sort of things. And you're missing out on newer packages as well, because the community are creating packages, but not for the old versions. Like you're missing out on all of these advancements and changes.
Mm. Matt, what are your thoughts on just leaving a website to run there forever?
Yeah, it's a well. I mean, yeah, it will until somebody either hacks it or it will require an architecture that's so old that that's no longer supported. So yeah, everything in IT moves forward. You have to keep up, and security and performance and usability are the reason everything keeps changing. And if we're looking at an Umbraco 7 site now, that's the next to come to the end of life, as Paul's just said, then we're looking at 10-year-old technology, and in this industry, that's starting to show its age. There's been tremendous advances in the CMS code and usability, security, performance, all sorts of areas in that time period, and the options are so much greater. And apart from anything else, if you've got a 10-year-old website, then probably it's starting to visually look dated as well. So there's a good marketing reason to look at redesigning that, and an upgrade of your CMS would make sense as part of that process.
Yeah, I know that for many of our clients, do nothing is not an option because their website is mission critical. Website stops, that's a big problem. So they're maintaining the website, keeping it up to date is part of their strategy. But we do have some clients who might have some older websites tucked away in the corner there, and they've let that build up to the point where it's now become sort of a technical debt issue, and then they actually have a big project to clear them out. So eventually, I think do nothing does catch up, and for some people, it's not an option. But when you do decide that you want to do a migration or an upgrade, and you look at, well, this is actually maybe your site is a little bit complex and it's a bit of a project to upgrade it. We need to look at where the business value comes from, because it's not just about all technical questions. You've got to convince your manager, you've got approval, and there's costs involved. So let's take the really tricky one, which is you're not going to change the way the website looks. You're just going to worry about upgrading. We're not going to change the way the website looks. So we're now in a situation where, okay, this thing's going to look the same, and I'm going to spend a bunch of money on it. What do I get by going particularly to the newer versions of 9 and 10?
Well, what you would get if you're on version 9 or 10, you would get a lot better performance. So I did a talk at Umbraco together last year with my other colleague, Matt Hart, and we compared the performance of Umbraco 8 versus Umbraco 9. We installed the same starter kit on both sites, and we used K6 to throw a load of traffic at it. And we could see that the performance was, I think it was about double. On each tier, it was usually about double, or maybe not quite double, but basically the .NET Core solution, the V9 and 10 one, was far better for performance, and also the fact that you can now host that on Linux means that you can bring the costs down as well. So you could, to get the same performance from a V8 site, you would need to spend twice as much as you would on the V7 on a V9 or 10 site that's hosted on a Linux Azure. This was in Azure, so yeah, you get a cost benefit because of that. You get better performance on the site, and also even if the front end looks the same and everything like that, and you just change it over, what you're actually doing is by changing over to the newer technology and perhaps implementing the block list, which is in the newer versions of Umbraco like 8, 9, and 10, you're giving yourself an easier way to add on new things. So it's easier to now integrate with the block list and add new features and sections to your site. And also, like I mentioned before, be able to use the newer data types and things like that. So you might not see anything straight away when you did your upgrade because the front end stayed the same, but you're in a position now to build on that going forward.
Nice. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the thing I'd add to that is going back to your comment on the doing nothing or delaying it till you get to the point that now you're under a pressure to upgrade. I think well-planned upgrades that are done more often are much easier to manage and can save a delayed business cost of, oh, we'll leave it until it's actually really critical. So doing things in a controlled manner where you've got time and you're not under a pressure, and there can be some thought about how to go about that process rather than having to do something more reactive later, actually is, a sound business value model to control your expense and the maintenance of your website.
Yeah. The Go Grand option, where we can have two websites running at the same time, I think part of the rationale there is not having to wait until your entire website is built in whatever the new version is before you can launch it, because you have to wait a long time. If you've built a little bit and you can then launch that little bit early, you're bringing that value forward earlier. You're not having to wait so long until the business value arrives. It starts to arrive earlier. And as Paul pointed out, as you're working on the new website, the editors are enjoying the new editor experience, and there's sort of hidden benefits there. Oh, we can do more here, and maybe you're unlocking some blocks that were there in the way you used to edit and manage your content previously. So I think there's ways we can try and bring the business value forward. All right. So we've mentioned a little bit about the Umbraco versions today, and now following Code Garden, we know that Umbraco 10 is here. So what about Umbraco 10? Does it change the game in any way? What's really different about Umbraco 10? And if clients are thinking of now going to like 8, 9, or 10, what are the considerations?
If you were to ask me now where to upgrade to or migrate to, I would be recommending Umbraco 10 because it's the new long-term solution, and it's aligned with it's a long-term version that's aligned with Microsoft's long-term versions as well. So it's built to support .NET 6, which is Microsoft's long-term one as well. So I think when .NET 7 comes out, they'll be working on Umbraco 11, etc., but they won't be long-term support versions. So first of all, it's long-term support. So Umbraco 8 was that, but then you've got the performance benefits of Umbraco 10, which we've already spoken about. You've got newer features like you've got the history cleanup included in there. You've got the item relations. So it can, all the new features as well, by the way, are no longer being added to version 8, which was the other long-term support version. So any new features that are coming through would only be coming through on 10 and above. So you've got two-factor authentication for users and members now. So if we're thinking about security and things like that, I think two-factor authentication is becoming a standard Most of the things I log into have 2FA on them. And also there's so much activity going on with Umbraco forms at the moment for version 10 of Umbraco that you're benefiting from all of these changes. I think there's been nearly more changes done in the last year for Umbraco forms than beforehand, because they've got someone focused solely on Umbraco forms, and Umbraco forms is one of the big benefits of Umbraco. So yeah, and one of the other things is the cross-platform development and hosting. So you might have your site, and perhaps it's Moriyama who supports your site or does iterations for add new features and things, but you might also have your own developers, and those developers aren't tied to just Windows now. When it comes to developing for Umbraco 10, they can be developing on their Macs or their Linux or whatever.
Matt, I think the change of 9 to 10 in particular also changes the version of .NetCore that runs underneath. Is that interesting?
Yes. So yeah, 9 to 10 goes from .NET 5 to .NET 6. If I put my sort of geek cap on, then I get very excited about .NET 6 because of something called nullable types. What it means in sort of real world terms is that actually it's a change in the core .NET language that the whole of Umbraco is built on that actually can make your code a bit more robust. Robust code is always a plus in any web-facing situation. So that's might seem a small thing underneath, but actually sort of getting all excited and geeky about the technology, it's quite a big move forward.
Interesting. So for me, the takeaway is, yes, Umbraco 10, if I was doing my planning and strategy at this time, couldn't I go to Umbraco 10? But if that was too big a step, Umbraco 8 is still an option. And if you're on Umbraco 8 now, you've got time and you can enjoy the benefits of being on Umbraco 8. I think a lot of the other experiences, particularly from 7 to 8, have improved enormously. So there's plenty you can do with your Umbraco 8 site as well. And start your planning is another takeaway, I would guess. Start planning now. Watch this space. Which then I think brings us up to questions. If we have any questions from our attendees, type away in the chat. While they're doing that, there is one question I would like to ask, which is, we've focused a lot on Umbraco migrations from Umbraco to Umbraco, but Umbraco is it's great CMS. It's also part of a wider digital experience sort of marketplace with a lot of various add-ons there that you could use to do more than just content management. If you were moving from another CMS like Sitecore or Episerver or Kentico or any number, what would be the basic approach, do you think? Matt, maybe coming back to, again, the data migration question.
Yeah. So we've done quite a bit of work on some tooling already internally for moving content from one version of Umbraco to another. In concept, the conceptual way that content is stored in the CMS is the same, whether it's any version of Umbraco or whether it's, as you say, Episerver, Sitecore, Kentico. Conceptually, the way of storing content is very similar, but the actual details can be quite different, and that's the reason initially we created our tooling was because the data storage in an Umbraco 7 site compared with an Umbraco 8 or an Umbraco 10 site can be very different, and so being able to migrate that data from one to another is why we created the tooling. Now with that tooling that works around that conceptual similarity, there's nothing stopping us extending that to write the connectors that would take the data from a Sitecore and import the content straight into Umbraco, or to take content from EpiServer and import it straight into Umbraco. Because of the way we've designed our tooling, it would be quite possible for us to extend it to any of those other CMSs as well, and that opens up lots of opportunities.
I think Sitecore 8.2 is end of life, and Umbraco is, I think, a bit ahead of the market in being one of the first to run solely on .NET Core 6. So it's also a landing place there for other end-of-life CMSs. You could move to Umbraco 10, be on long-term version, and be in a good place for some years to come. Okay, well, I think that's bringing us to a close. That was my main question that I wanted to ask. I don't know if we have any others. If not, why don't see if we can say, yeah, I think it's all quiet from everyone. That's, I guess this is a bit odd. I'm used to MS Teams and I can see people's faces.
Yeah.
Oh.
All
right.
Well, no questions.
Oh, yeah, we've got a question.
Hey.
We have one.
Thanks, Jason.
I have a question.
If you're plugin on version 7, can these be brought into 10?
So shall I answer that one?
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
So by plugin, I think you mean like a package for Umbraco 7. And I've created quite a few packages, and I've worked with other package developers, and I've judged on the package awards panel for the last 2 years. So I've learned quite a bit about Umbraco packages. And there are a lot of packages that have been brought through the versions. So editor notes is one that I can think of, that Mark, who used to work here at Moriyama, that used to be on Umbraco 7, and he's brought that up to date to work on Umbraco 10, and that won an award this year. So it was actually working previously on V7, and it works again now on V10. So no, it was a custom plugin extending the back office. So some of the code might be different, but you can still extend the back office. You can still add dashboards and sections and trees and all sorts. The things that you could do before, the code just might be different. But yeah, I would say so. It's all possible to convert something that was on V7 over to V10. Whether that's one you built yourself or one that someone else has built.
Okay.
It's unlikely to work out of the box. It would need some work.
Yeah,
yeah, definitely possible to make that.
Yeah, one thing I would say, if it's all the Angular side of things and there's no actual .NET code, it probably will just work if you drop that app plugin file folder into the V10 one. It probably will just work if it's just the Angular side of things. But if it's more than that and it's running some .NET code as well, then it will probably need a bit of an upgrade.
Any others? What's this? Oh, that's supposed to be 2 here. 5. Nice. All right. I think then that roughly brings us to a close, unless we see another question pop in. Thanks everyone for attending. We will be, I think, sharing a recording of today's webinar, and we've got.
We've got another question dropped in.
Come on, Matt. So what about the content of different packages?
Not quite sure what you mean by your question, Matt. If you could elaborate, then might be able to answer it, but I'm not quite sure on what that means.
Well, while he's elaborating, I'll take a guess. So, for example, there have been some packages in version 7 that weren't recreated, but an equivalent was recreated in the newer version, and the way the content stored is different. So he's getting a bit more detail here.
Okay, so a V7 package that has content. Will it be able to push to the return side of the same package?
So V7's package has a content. Okay, what, like a starter kit or something? Will it be able to push it to a V10 site? So I would separate the content from the package itself. Once the content's in Umbraco, then that's content on Umbraco, unless it's like vendor, which has its own tables perhaps. But then that would be by that package creator to migrate that across or work out a migration plan for you. So if it's content that's gone into the Umbraco version, you treat it as the content with that version of Umbraco, and you do whatever you was doing with the rest of the content. If it's content in a custom database table, then you should be able to move those tables across as well.
And sometimes as well, you can have content that's just completely different, but they're essentially doing the same thing. So in version 7, we had something that was called stacked content. It was very heavily used. It basically enabled you to put sort of repeated pieces of content within one property. And then, that just doesn't exist in version 8, 9, and 10. But they do have the block list, which is a very good way of handling conceptually the same type of data. So that's one of the things that we've used in our tooling, is to say, okay, this stack content is essentially a list of items, and these items have these 5 properties. And so we create a block list in the newer version that has those same 5 properties, and then we can map the data across. And all of that data can be maintained even though it started in completely different format in one version to the format it ended up in its target. Yeah. So that's the type of way that we can handle things. If a package no longer exists, but there's something that does the same job, even if it stores things in a different format, then we can use our data tooling to move that data across.
That's the automagically bit.
That's the automagically.
It is, yes.
Okay then, so I think we've done our webinar time and questions time, so we'll sign out now. Thanks everyone again for attending. We'll send out the recording, and we'll also have some follow-up topics coming up in the next month, and so we'll communicate that as well.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Bye now.
Bye.